I am Arabella Wood, 30, and I'm a judge. I'd just secured a massive corporate fraud conviction, my biggest career win. But the real verdict was waiting at home. My father, William Wood, looked up from his tablet and delivered the sentence, "Arabella, we need your room, Clara is moving back in." The shock wasn't about the room. It was the sudden, brutal clarity of my real value to them. My mother, with her practiced smile, delivered the follow-up, "Clara needs stability, Arabella, we're only here on weekends. You have a choice, agree to the terms, or get out of this house permanently." Fear flared, then instantly froze into rage. I saw their true faces, not family, but judges, finding me expendable. I left them with only my silence. What would you do when the family you saved gives you an ultimatum? Outside those gilded walls, my life was a picture of perfect control. At 30, I was one of the youngest judges in the region, dealing with high-stakes financial crime. I analyzed evidence, applied cold logic, and delivered judgment. My world was built on integrity and facts. I was respected, capable, and financially independent, but when I stepped back into the Wood family mansion, I ceased being Arabella, the judge. I became Anna, the convenient daughter. Our family was a beautiful lie, maintained by my parents' obsession with status and Clara's manufactured fragility. It was a constant, exhausting performance. They thrived on chaos I was constantly expected to minimize. My professional life was governed by the law, while my family life was governed by unwritten, toxic rules of favoritism. The question was, which set of rules would finally break? In the Wood house, I was the supporting character, the reliable daughter who never needed attention. Clara, the golden child, was always the star, constantly coddled for her delicate artistic soul. My achievements were merely expected, hers were celebrated like national holidays. I learned quickly that silence was my safest armor. They didn't see me, they saw a solution to their problems. The neglect wasn't kind, but it was formative. While Clara chased fleeting artistic whims subsidized by my father, I built an empire of discipline. My resilience wasn't inherited, it was forged in the isolation of that childhood room. I mastered logic because I couldn't rely on love. My ambition became my only true, unwavering parent. But how much did that discipline truly cost me, and was my success just another way to try and earn the love they refused to give? The true price was about to be demanded. The first definitive betrayal didn't involve a man, it involved money. I was 15, working toward a prestigious summer law program. I'd earned a small scholarship. One evening, my father casually announced they had withdrawn my application and diverted the funds to Clara's photography course. They called it reallocating resources. That night, the concept of fairness died in the Wood house. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just made a silent vow, I would succeed without a single dollar of their support. The question was, how brutal would my independence need to be? I finally broke my silence. I didn't yell, I spoke with the controlled voice I used in the courtroom. My room is my only remaining private space in this house, and I pay for my own upkeep. Why now? My mother sighed, as if I were a tedious litigant. The question was logical, the answer was pure gaslighting. Clara needed an immediate retreat from the world, the story unfolded. Clara had, predictably, failed at her latest artistic venture and needed to hide from the pressure she couldn't handle. And my room, the only space I had earned through sheer, unyielding effort, was deemed the most appropriate sanctuary for her failure. My hard work was merely storage space for their fragility. I saw the pattern, my success was her failure's safety net. My blood was boiling. I had faced hostile witnesses and ruthless prosecutors, but nothing compared to the calculated cruelty of my own mother. This wasn't just about a room, it was the final curtain call of the scapegoat. They were demanding I physically erase my existence so the golden child could comfortably retreat. I had to choose, explode, or execute. I took a deep breath. The years of discipline kicked in. The rage didn't vanish, but it was weaponized. I realized that arguing was still playing their game. My real revenge wouldn't be a word I spoke, but an action I took. I chose execution. The question is, what does a judge do when she decides her own family is guilty? My mother, sensing my controlled silence was a danger, switched tactics immediately. She held my hand, eyes welling with fake concern. "Anna, please don't be difficult. This is what good daughters do. Think of the peace you're bringing Clara. It's a small, loving sacrifice. You know we only ask this because we trust your resilience." It was a perfect emotional double bind, cooperation disguised as virtue. The moment her soft approach failed, my father took over. William Wood, the Iron Fist. He stood over me, his voice dropping to a dangerous baritone. "We built this family, Arabella. If you cause trouble, I'll ensure your career suffers. I know every judge, every partner in this city. Don't mistake your independence for leverage." The mask finally dropped. It was pure, simple coercion. The threat didn't break me, it clarified my goal. Their power lay in maintaining my dependence on their approval and influence. By threatening my career, they were threatening the only thing I had ever truly built for myself. I realized my greatest power was already separate from them. The game was set, total severing, or total submission. I gave them the answer they demanded, but not the victory they expected. The storm was coming. And I was the one bringing the thunder. But what did I lose before I could truly begin to win? I walked into my room, the only space I had ever truly claimed. It wasn't luxurious, it was a relic of my independence. The posters were gone, but the ghost of 15-year-old me, studying, planning, dreaming, still lingered. This room witnessed every sacrifice, every late night fueled by coffee and defiance. It was the silent library of my true achievements. They weren't just taking the space, they were erasing the evidence. Every corner held a scar. That desk where I got the rejection notice for the scholarship they stole. That small bookshelf where I hid my journals. Losing this room felt like losing the last shred of my innocence, the tiny belief that one day, my parents would finally acknowledge that I was worth fighting for. That fragile hope finally shattered into cold, usable pieces. As I packed, the judge took over. I wasn't clearing out, I was conducting an inventory. I gathered the crucial documents, the old property agreements my father never thought I read, the financial data I quietly collected over the years. My emotional devastation became my strategic calm. Every piece of paper was evidence of their systemic betrayal. Clara sashayed in, pretending to help. "Oh, I'll need to paint this a lighter color, Anna. It's too serious for me. Just leave the rest, the movers can handle it." She didn't see the tears I hadn't shed. She only saw the space she was entitled to. Her entitlement was the purest form of contempt. Her casual cruelty was the final nail in the family coffin. While Clara was measuring for new curtains, I was measuring the fallout. I wasn't moving out, I was disconnecting. I encrypted my personal data, emptied shared accounts I secretly funded, and initiated a deep, quiet review of the family's assets. The scapegoat was now the architect of destruction. My exit would be more than physical, it would be financial. I left nothing behind that tied me to their narrative. No sentimental photographs, no shared history. The room was sterile, ready for the golden child's new chapter. But that chapter would begin with a severe deficit, not just emotional, but strategic. I was taking my leverage with me. The final battle required one last, unforgivable move. They thought I was defeated, mournfully gathering my belongings. They had no idea I was building the case for the complete dismantling of the illusion they called a family. The judge was finally preparing her verdict. I was exiting, but not before striking the final blow. But what was that final blow, and how did I deliver it without them even noticing? They thought my silence was compliance, a sad farewell from the dutiful daughter. They were wrong. I closed the box containing the last remnants of Anna, the scapegoat. This wasn't an eviction, it was a severance package. I was leaving on my own terms, not theirs. The feeling was intoxicating. The chains were finally cut. For years, their cruelty had dictated my actions, my overachieving, my silence, my emotional withdrawal. But now, their cruelty had dictated their fate. They had given me the perfect, clean break I needed to execute my long-planned exit strategy. They didn't push me out, they delivered me my freedom. My silence now wasn't submission, it was strategy. I mentally reviewed the evidence I'd secured, the forged signatures on the property deed, the unaccounted-for funds from my grandfather's trust, the digital paper trail proving the family shell corporations. The judge in me knew this was an open-and-shut case of familial financial abuse. I didn't need their love, I needed their liability. My exit was the first step in the prosecution of the Woods. As I reached the foyer, I saw Clara admiring her new domain. She looked triumphant. Let her have her victory. It was a hollow one. The narrative they wrote, the scapegoat cast out, the golden child welcomed, was collapsing around their ears. I was writing the final chapter, and it was a non-fiction. They were celebrating my defeat, but they were signing their death warrant. They thought my silence was compliance, a sad farewell from the dutiful daughter. They were wrong. I closed the box containing the last remnants of Anna, the scapegoat. This wasn't an eviction, it was a severance package. I was leaving on my own terms, not theirs. The feeling was intoxicating. The chains were finally cut. For years, their cruelty had dictated my actions, my overachieving, my silence, my emotional withdrawal. But now, their cruelty had dictated their fate. They had given me the perfect, clean break I needed to execute my long-planned exit strategy. They didn't push me out, they delivered me my freedom. My silence now wasn't submission, it was strategy. I mentally reviewed the evidence I'd secured, the forged signatures on the property deed, the unaccounted-for funds from my grandfather's trust, the digital paper trail proving the family shell corporations. The judge in me knew this was an open-and-shut case of familial financial abuse. I didn't need their love, I needed their liability. My exit was the first step in the prosecution of the Woods. As I reached the foyer, I saw Clara admiring her new domain. She looked triumphant. Let her have her victory. It was a hollow one. The narrative they wrote, the scapegoat cast out, the golden child welcomed, was collapsing around their ears. I was writing the final chapter, and it was a non-fiction. They were celebrating my defeat, but they were signing their death warrant. Before I left, I performed my final, silent move. Hidden deep behind a false panel in the wall, I placed a specialized USB drive. It wasn't for me. It was a Trojan horse designed to monitor the family's server, a subtle, digital backdoor. They had kicked me out, but I was leaving a spy. The physical room was Clara's, the digital domain was mine. The first step in my new apartment was to build a financial firewall. I changed all the security questions on my shared investment accounts and transferred the capital I had secretly accumulated for years. No cosigner, no shared access. I severed every tangible thread of financial dependence. Independence wasn't a right, it was a strategy. I organized the evidence, the documents relating to the trust fund embezzlement, the contracts proving my father's shell company avoided millions in taxes, the forged signatures on the deed of the vacation home. My personal pain was transmuted into legal grounds. The evidence wasn't emotional, it was damning. My first formal action was to engage a private counsel, a discreet, ruthless partner from a firm outside the city. I presented the case to him without mentioning my last name, Client A versus Corporation X. He saw the airtight fraud case. I outsourced the emotional labor, keeping the cold logic for myself. My role was not the victim, it was the whistleblower. The Trojan horse USB was humming. feeding me data on their spending, their communications, their mounting panic over recent business losses. I found the weak point, a multi-million-dollar real estate deal in William's name that depended entirely on a clean public profile. Their arrogance was their ultimate vulnerability. I was mapping the territory for a total strategic nuclear strike. I saw the immediate, small price they paid. Since I left, the family bank was closed. Clara's extravagant shopping habit was instantly curbed, leading to tantrums and public scenes. My parents, now without my reliable income to prop up Clara, were facing real financial strain. The golden child's golden supply chain was cut. This taste of small victory only sharpened my appetite. For the first week, there was silence. No calls demanding my return, no texts pleading for forgiveness. They expected me to crawl back, defeated. Their silence was the most profound confirmation of their narcissism. To them, silence meant my capitulation, not my calculated strike. Their arrogance was the most delicious part of the trap. Every small act in my new apartment was a rebellion. Buying my own coffee maker, choosing my own paint color, these were affirmations of a life truly owned. I was simultaneously working on the family's destruction and building my own foundation. Justice requires both demolition and construction. The quiet peace of my new home was my first trophy. I set a timeline. Phase 1, financial isolation. Phase 2, legal exposure. Phase 3, public collapse. The timing was critical. I needed the consequences to hit when William was most exposed professionally. My revenge wasn't instant, it was an investment, scheduled for maximum impact. Every step was taken with the cold logic of a prosecutor. I could see their frantic emails, their frantic searches for a lawyer to fix their financial mess, the very mess I had spent my life cleaning up for free. They were swimming in the swamp, not realizing I was the one who had drained their safe ground. I was the silent spectator of their impending ruin. The most dangerous player is the one you forget to count. The groundwork was complete. The evidence was secured, the finances isolated, and the target's weakest point identified. All that remained was the moment of execution, the moment I would confront them with my final, chilling smile. I was ready to deliver my verdict. But what did that icy smile truly signal? I stood at the threshold. My parents watched me with smug certainty, believing they had won. I looked at Clara, already basking in the comfort of her new, larger space. I saw not family, but defendants. This moment wasn't an exit, it was the start of the sentencing hearing. Their victory was my final, perfect alibi. The time for talking was over, the time for action had begun. I let my gaze linger. Not in anger, but in calculation. I offered a smile. It wasn't the warm, obedient smile of Anna they expected. It was tight, surgical, and utterly devoid of warmth, the smile of a judge who knows the truth and holds the hammer. It was the first visible crack in their illusion of control. My father flinched slightly. He didn't know why, but he felt the shift. Before turning my back, I placed the smallest, most insignificant item on their pristine mahogany coffee table, a small, personalized calendar listing all their upcoming, highly sensitive professional appointments. I crossed out one date, the day William was scheduled for his final real estate approval. It was a small, silent prophecy, their time was no longer their own. I walked out. No slamming doors, no tears, no dramatic dialogue. I left only that small, crossed-out calendar on the table, a cryptic message to the family that prided itself on control. They wouldn't understand it yet, but it was my first unspoken verdict. The trial was over, and they had been found guilty. They had created a monster, and I had just been unleashed. They were probably still smiling when I closed the door. But that smile faded the moment my mother noticed the calendar. She would dismiss it as a childish, passive-aggressive move. My father, the cautious businessman, would feel a cold dread, a prickle of alarm. The first domino had been pushed, silently and precisely. They expected a plea, they received a declaration of war. My icy smile wasn't revenge, it was relief. Relief that I no longer had to perform the role of the good daughter. Relief that I was finally free to apply my considerable intelligence and training to the problem they presented. Their family dysfunction was about to meet my judicial process. How long would it take them to realize their biggest threat was the daughter they just dismissed? The downfall begins now. I didn't slam the door. That was Clara's melodrama. I closed it with a quiet click, a legal finality. That sound was the gavel striking the bench, announcing the adjournment of the Wood family pretense. Outside, the air felt different, thicker with freedom, thinner with expectation. I was no longer a daughter, I was a fully self-actualized entity. The weight lifted from my shoulders was 2 decades of obligation. My feet found a rhythm I hadn't felt in years, my own rhythm. Every step away from that house was a conscious choice, a rejection of their narrative. I didn't look back. There was nothing to salvage, only a toxic history to prosecute. I was walking into my future, carrying only the evidence. The freedom felt clinical, not emotional. The little voice of 15-year-old Anna, the girl who lost her scholarship and her hope, spoke again. Succeed without a single dollar of their support. Now, the voice of the judge replied, and ensure they can no longer deny anyone else the same support. My revenge was no longer personal, it was institutional. The emotional engine was switched to tactical cruise control. I drove away, merging onto the highway. The moment I hit cruising speed, I made the first call. Not to my mother, not to Clara. To my private counsel. It's done. I'm out. Initiate Phase 1, Financial Isolation. I want the injunction filed by the end of the day. The clock had officially started ticking on the Wood family legacy. Phase 1, the financial chokehold. Back at the house, they were probably just throwing that calendar away, laughing at my pathetic attempt at drama. They were oblivious to the legal paperwork already being filed, the freezing of their primary assets, the inquiry into William's tax fraud. They were signing divorce papers, and they thought they were signing a grocery list. Their ignorance was the luxury I had paid for. I had everything I needed, a clean break, a powerful lawyer, and irrefutable proof of their corruption. The stage was set for the public spectacle. But the biggest question remained: how did the Wood family react when they realized the daughter they sacrificed was the one holding the match to their whole world? Get ready for the fallout. The downfall begins now. I allowed myself a single, fleeting moment of sorrow. Not for them, but for the little girl who had desperately tried to win their love within those 4 walls. That room was where I learned to be invisible and invincible. Losing it was painful, like amputating a dead limb, necessary, but the residual sting lingered. That sting was the last gasp of Anna. But the judge required the operation, emotions were a liability. I saw the ghost of myself curled on the bed, studying while the sounds of Clara's celebratory party drifted up the hall. That room wasn't a sanctuary, it was a prison I'd chosen to fill with books and ambition. It was the training ground where I transformed neglect into discipline. Every tear shed was an investment in my current escape. That room taught me the value of being underestimated. Now, Clara would paint over those walls, literally erasing my history. She'd fill it with soft, expensive nonsense. She'd turn my battleground into her lazy retreat. I almost laughed. Let her. She was decorating a room that was already legally collateralized against William's secret debts. She was painting her own future tomb. The room was lost, but the house was next. The memory was sharp, but the reaction was clinical. I was a surgeon, and the nostalgia was a distraction. I pressed down on the accelerator. The past was behind me, secured in a box of evidence. The only view that mattered now was the road ahead, the one leading to the courthouse. The grieving period was officially over. My heart had turned to the purest kind of steel, cold, precise, and unbreakable. I glanced at the file containing the Wood family trust documents. My years of unappreciated brilliance, the law degree, the financial literacy, the discipline, were finally being applied to their intended target. All the power they denied me was now concentrated and weaponized against their most guarded secrets. I was the unintended consequence of their systemic abuse. The only way to win their game was to change the rules to my jurisdiction. My departure was complete. The grieving was done. The plan was activated. I was ready to step out of the shadows and onto the national stage. But what does the Wood family do when they receive the formal legal notice, and the lawyer serving them is the one they thought they had crushed? The reckoning is here. Let's watch the world burn. The noise of the city replaced the silence of the suburbs. The physical distance grew, but the judicial process intensified. I was the Chief Justice of my own life now, and the family I left behind was in the dock. The question wasn't if they were guilty, but what the appropriate sentence would be. My judgment would be final and non-appealable. William Wood, guilty of abandonment and coercion. He valued his public image and financial control over the well-being of his child. His threat to destroy my career was his last, desperate attempt to control the uncontrolled asset. His sentence, financial ruin and public disgrace. He failed to see that I was his shield, now I would be his sword. My mother, guilty of extreme emotional cruelty and collusion. She was the one who enforced the toxic family roles, weaponizing love and guilt to ensure my compliance. She was the architect of the scapegoat's identity. Her sentence, the loss of her golden image and the destruction of her comfort. The true pain of a narcissist is losing the audience. Clara, guilty of willful ignorance and theft of opportunity. She benefited from the system without question, never acknowledging the cost to me. She isn't truly malicious, just blindly entitled. Her sentence, financial austerity and the sudden, harsh need for self-sufficiency. She would finally learn the difference between dependence and freedom. My goal was never revenge as a heated emotional act. My goal was retribution, the legal and moral correction of a systemic injustice. The punishment must fit the crime. They stole my future and my identity, so I would dismantle theirs. It was a judicial balancing of the scales, not a fiery explosion. The law was my weapon, the facts were my ammunition. The greatest freedom was the loss of feeling. I had achieved emotional immunity. Their future tears, their pleas for mercy, none of it would reach me. I had built a wall of evidence and legal precedent so high that emotion could not cross it. This protection was the greatest gift my years of neglect gave me. They could try to hurt Anna, but the judge was untouchable. The plan was a financial and legal dismantling. It started with the freeze on the trust, stopping the flow of capital. Next, the tax fraud whistleblower report, ensuring maximum professional damage. Finally, the public lawsuit over the stolen scholarship and property fraud. It was a three-pronged, perfectly sequenced attack. The Wood family was about to receive the shock of their entitled lives. The irony was beautiful. The very skills they demanded I develop, the relentless work ethic, the mastery of contract law, the ability to operate under extreme pressure, were the tools I was now using to destroy them. They had inadvertently built the weapon of their own destruction. Every success of mine was a step towards their ruin. My phone pinged. A brief text from my counsel, injunction filed. Freeze confirmed. That was it. No fanfare, no drama. Just the cold, hard fact of legal action. The Wood family's assets, the foundation of their entire existence, were momentarily locked. The first tangible blow had landed. They were still enjoying their coffee, unaware their financial house was shaking. I searched for a spark of guilt, a flicker of remorse for the pain I was inflicting. There was none. Guilt is the cost of love, and they had severed that bond long ago. They had reduced my emotional reserves to zero. I wasn't committing an act of malice, I was exercising a right to self-defense. My hands were clean because my heart was numb. Pulling into my new parking spot felt like crossing a finish line and a starting line simultaneously. This was my space, paid for by my diligence, secured by my legal knowledge. The old life, the toxic life, was now just a case file on my passenger seat. The true victory was the peace of mind I instantly achieved. The Wood family was background noise to my new symphony. I ensured zero contact. My lawyer would handle all communication. My silence was not personal, it was strategic. Any emotional interaction could be spun against me in court. I would be the ghost in their machine, the unseen force destroying their empire from within. My existence was now a legal black hole to them. They would learn that silence is the loudest form of contempt. Clara would be the most unprepared. She had no skills, no resilience, and no concept of work. The sudden loss of wealth would crush her identity. I felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that her inevitable collapse was a necessary side effect of the core verdict. Justice often comes with collateral damage. Her fate was sealed the moment she took my childhood room. Did I ever love them? Maybe the idea of them. The parents I was supposed to have. But the reality? That love was poisoned and died long ago. My final judgment was not about hate, it was about recognition. I recognized them as abusers, and I freed myself from their contract. Hate is a chain, apathy is the key to freedom. Now, I wait. The legal system moves slowly, but it moves surely. They have their initial shock, but the true devastation will be the slow, agonizing realization that every door they try to open is locked, and the key is held by the daughter they betrayed. The slow burn is always the most effective poison. I had planned for years, I could wait for months. The inner verdict was final. The sentence was passed. The execution was underway. But how did the Wood family try to claw their way out of the legal and financial black hole I created? Did they finally try to apologize, or did they only descend further into their narcissism? The downfall is relentless. Let's see them panic. Let's see them panic. The silence of my new apartment was almost unbearable, not an empty silence, but the absence of tension. No walking on eggshells, no preparing for verbal attacks. It was the sound of my own thoughts, unfiltered and calm. This peace was the true victory, the reward I earned long before the revenge began. The toxic noise had finally stopped. My life was no longer reactive, it was intentional. The Trojan horse was still running, giving me a live feed of the chaos unfolding at home. I didn't feel joy watching their frantic emails about the frozen accounts. I felt a professional detachment, like a meteorologist tracking a storm. They were panicking, I was merely observing the consequences of their actions. I was the puppet master who had cut her own strings. Their meltdown was merely data for my case file. My work was my anchor. I was building my own reputation, block by block, unrelated to the Wood name. I signed my first major pro bono case that week, dedicating my legal mind to genuine justice, not family corruption. This was the definitive rejection of their value system. My career was my own, earned, not granted. The silence was the sound of my own financial security growing. Phase 1 was complete. Financial isolation was achieved. The next step was the public exposure of William's tax fraud, a true existential threat. The peace was the calm before the media storm. But how did the Wood family react to the news that their world was being dismantled by an unseen force? Let's see the family unravel. My new apartment was deliberately minimalist. No expensive, showy furniture. Just the essentials, a functional desk, a comfortable chair, and a solid wall of legal texts. I was shedding the material excess of the wood life, proving I needed none of their trappings to succeed. My success was built on substance, not superficiality. The space was clean, like the case I was building. My days were regimented by my own clock, not theirs. Up at 5, a brutal morning run, rebuilding the physical strength they ignored. The discipline wasn't about punishment, it was about self-mastery. Every breath, every stride, was a step towards an unassailable self. I was fortifying the fortress of my mind and body. Unbreakable from the outside, solid from the inside. My commitment to the pro bono case was my ethical compass. Fighting for a small business owner crushed by a powerful, corrupt corporation. It was the antithesis of everything the Wood family stood for. It wasn't just work, it was a purification ritual, cleansing the taint of their money and their morals. I was fighting for the justice denied to me. My life was now defined by what I protected, not what I punished. I found one remaining piece of the old life, a framed family portrait. No anger, just cold finality. I took it outside and burned it. Watching the picture curl and turn to ash, I realized I wasn't erasing a memory, but destroying a performance. The script was terminated, the actors dismissed. I had achieved the clean slate they thought they had. Financial security was no longer a dependency, it was a fortress. I invested my capital in ethical, diversified portfolios, establishing several trusts in my legal name. These actions weren't about greed, they were about survival. I was ensuring that no one could ever again use money as a weapon against me. Self-sufficiency was the ultimate defense mechanism. Every dollar was an instrument of my own freedom. The frantic calls started filtering through my lawyer's office. William was demanding to know why the trust was frozen. My mother called my old number repeatedly. They tried to break the silence. I watched the caller ID, a number I didn't recognize, and let it ring. I had given them my silence, they had earned my indifference. Their panic was confirmation that Phase 1 was a success. My spy feed showed Clara screaming at my mother because her credit card was declined at an upscale boutique. The golden child was experiencing consequences for the first time. The money was gone, and the entitled personality remained, creating maximum friction. The family unit was already fracturing from within. My absence was their most expensive luxury item. The time for waiting was drawing to a close. I had secured my perimeter and witnessed the success of the initial chokehold. Now, the next domino was ready to fall, the one that would bring the entire legal and public pressure down on William. It was time to transition from financial isolation to public exposure. What happens when a man whose entire life is a lie suddenly faces the truth in the media spotlight? William's first reaction wasn't fear, but rage, the rage of a powerful man realizing he's been locked out of his safe. He immediately called his old, expensive lawyer, who promptly refused the case once my legal notice was cited. The Wood name, once an asset, was now a liability. My strategy of isolating their resources was already working perfectly. Money can buy anything, but it can't buy legal innocence. My mother, the queen of pretense, was cracking. Without access to her discretionary funds, she couldn't maintain her image. Her texts to Clara showed a meltdown, not over William's legal trouble, but over her cancelled charity gala reservation. Her entire identity was tied to her spending power. And I had cut the cord. The true horror for her was the social humiliation. Clara was the canary in the coal mine, reacting to the financial change with petulant fury. She blamed my parents for not protecting their assets. There was no self-reflection, only a sense of having been personally defrauded. This confirmed my initial judgment: she was a product of the system, utterly incapable of surviving outside it. The golden throne was tipping, and she had no balance. William's first reaction wasn't fear, but rage, the rage of a powerful man realizing he's been locked out of his safe. He immediately called his old, expensive lawyer, who promptly refused the case once my legal notice was cited. The Wood name, once an asset, was now a liability. My strategy of isolating their resources was already working perfectly. Money can buy anything, but it can't buy legal innocence. My mother, the queen of pretense, was cracking. Without access to her discretionary funds, she couldn't maintain her image. Her texts to Clara showed a meltdown, not over William's legal trouble, but over her cancelled charity gala reservation. Her entire identity was tied to her spending power. And I had cut the cord. The true horror for her was the social humiliation. Clara was the canary in the coal mine, reacting to the financial change with petulant fury. She blamed my parents for not protecting their assets. There was no self-reflection, only a sense of having been personally defrauded. This confirmed my initial judgment: she was a product of the system, utterly incapable of surviving outside it. The golden throne was tipping, and she had no balance. My first pro bono case closed with a resounding victory. The small business owner, crushed by corruption, was vindicated. It was a victory earned through pure legal intellect and ethical rigor, the kind of triumph William Wood could never understand. The gratitude of my client was more valuable than any inheritance they could offer. I had finally won a game where the rules were fair. This success was real, built on merit, not manipulation. The legal community noticed. My name appeared in a major law journal, not because of my family, but for my principled defense of the marginalized. They praised my uncompromising ethical stance. This external validation was the final nail in the coffin of my former identity. Anna Wood was just a shadow, Arabella was a respected force of law. My light was shining because their shadow no longer covered me. I saw the headlines. William's tax inquiry was now public, covered by the financial news outlets he once courted. As my professional stock rose, theirs plummeted. Their frantic attempts to spin the story were failing, drowned out by the factual legal proceedings. While I was building, they were desperately trying to patch holes in a sinking ship. The Wood name was becoming toxic, mine was becoming invaluable. For the first time, I could talk to my friends without filtering every word, without worrying about my mother eavesdropping or Clara sabotaging the conversation. The relationships in my life were now based on mutual respect and honesty, not transactional utility. I was discovering the simple joy of authentic human connection. Love wasn't a test, it was a harbor. I signed the document confirming my legal name change from Anna Wood back to my professional name, Arabella. It was a formal, final severance. Anna, the scapegoat, was retired. The legal separation was complete, not just financially, but ancestrally. I was the founder of my own dynasty, beholden to no history. The Wood curse was broken. The Arabella legacy had begun. My life was flourishing because I had the courage to cut the dead weight. Their decline was irreversible, their reputation shattered, their finances compromised. But did they ever figure out that the disciplined, successful woman they now saw on the news was the daughter they sacrificed? How did William and Mother try to save their own skins when the walls finally came down? The final reckoning awaits. The news broke quietly in my office, but it was a thunderclap in the Wood family's world. Prominent business leader William Wood under federal investigation for tax fraud. The headline was clinical, but the implication was catastrophic. The image of William, once beaming, was now unflattering and pixelated. The truth, once hidden, was now public domain. It was phase 2, the beginning of the end. William's entire existence was predicated on controlling the narrative. Now, that control was gone. I saw clips of him trying to storm past reporters, his face a mask of panicked rage. He was used to commanding respect, not being chased like prey. The mighty lion was realizing the size of the cage I had built for him. His arrogance was the fuel for his public downfall. My mother's social collapse was equally spectacular. Her charity board membership was suspended pending clarification. Her high society friends quickly erased any public association. For her, social capital was currency, and I had instigated a bank run. She was now socially invisible, the exact fate she had always feared. The gilded cage was empty, and the audience was gone. The biggest thrill was watching them turn on each other. William blamed my mother for her excessive spending that required the tax evasion. My mother blamed William for his greedy schemes. The toxic bond of their marriage, built on image and finance, was finally snapping. Their shared history was now their shared liability. The family that abused together was now imploding alone. Clara was spotted exiting a mid-range store, looking distraught. Her reaction wasn't shame, but indignation at the injustice of having to live without. The scandal had cut off her supply, not her entitlement. Her crisis was existential, not moral. She was realizing that her life was a rental property, and the lease was up. The golden child was discovering the price of gold. The IRS investigation moved rapidly. My initial whistleblower report, meticulously sourced and legally sound, was the blueprint for their entire case. I had provided them with the smoking gun and the map to the treasury. My unacknowledged labor was finally paying dividends to society and to my freedom. Justice requires evidence, not emotion. I imagined the moment William realized the full scope of my involvement. Not anger, but a cold, empty feeling. The one they dismissed, the one they starved of resources, was the one who had methodically and legally ended them. The realization would be the true punishment, a cosmic irony that the daughter they broke was the judge who sealed their fate. They thought they controlled the story, I simply wrote the epilogue. I found an old email draft, written years ago, a desperate plea for recognition. I read the words, and they felt alien. The old Anna was begging for crumbs of affection. The new Arabella felt nothing. I deleted the draft. The need for their approval was the last piece of their control I had to incinerate. Freedom wasn't the revenge, it was the detachment. The civil lawsuit for the stolen scholarship was the final nail. It was low stakes for William compared to the federal charges, but it was symbolic. It was the public acknowledgement of the original sin. My lawyer was filing for summary judgment, no emotional trial needed. The facts were irrefutable, and the verdict was a foregone conclusion. I didn't need their apology, I needed their accountability. That night, I cooked my own dinner, something simple, perfectly portioned. I wasn't being served by staff or forced to attend a meaningless gala. I had earned this quiet kitchen, this moment of self-care. The true satisfaction wasn't in their downfall, but in the construction of my own life. My independence was the most beautiful revenge. The future was finally mine, unmarred by their past. The mirror showed the face of a successful woman, a respected attorney. The shadows of the scapegoat were gone. They tried to make me an enemy of the family, but they only succeeded in making me an enemy of the corruption they represented. The greatest gift of the abuse was the crystal clarity of my moral code. I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner of my own destiny. William faced indictment, my mother faced social and financial ruin, Clara faced the harsh realities of a life without a safety net. The consequences were not temporary but structural. They had to face the world as ordinary, flawed people, stripped of their power and their protection. They had to live the unprivileged life they created for me. The circle of consequences was complete. The scandal dominated the news cycle for weeks. The public loved the story, the entitled elite brought down by corruption. My anonymity was preserved, but my actions spoke volumes. I was the unseen hand of justice, ensuring that the Wood family drama played out on the biggest stage of all. Their private shame was now a public spectacle. The audience was massive, the applause was internal. The biggest lesson I learned? You don't have to choose between saving yourself and fighting back. The greatest revenge is simply building a life that makes their worst fears come true, that you succeeded without them, that you are better than them, and that you used their own rules to defeat them. The game was over, and I was the victor. The victory wasn't financial, it was existential. My future was secured, and their downfall was complete. But what about the scars? Did I ever look back and wonder if forgiveness was possible? And what became of Clara? Did the golden child finally find the strength to stand on her own, or did she completely collapse? The end of the story is always the beginning of the next. Stay tuned for the epilogue. The trust fund was officially liquidated to pay William's initial legal fees. Clara's downtown loft, the one I was meant to have, was sold to cover outstanding debts. I saw the photo, an eviction notice taped to the mahogany door. This wasn't revenge against her, it was the natural erosion of a foundation built on theft. She was finally paying the true market price for her life. Clara's last social media post was a defensive, dramatic rant about betrayal. Her usual audience of admirers and sycophants had disappeared. They weren't interested in the fall, they only celebrated the climb. Without their applause, Clara's sense of self was completely gutted. The golden child could no longer perform her golden life. Her power source was external, mine was internal. Unlike William, whose skills were corrupt but real, or my mother, whose skill was social manipulation, Clara had zero functional abilities. No education, no work ethic, no resilience. The Wood family's biggest failure was not recognizing that they had created an ornamental piece that could not withstand any real-world pressure. She had the privilege, but I had the tools. My hardship was my greatest training, her ease was her undoing. Clara was forced to move back into the collapsing family home. This meant the three remaining Woods were trapped together, their shame echoing off the very walls that once housed their arrogance. Their resentment of each other would be their shared prison. I felt a flicker of pity for Clara, but mostly relief that I wasn't trapped with them. Their chaos was now their own, no longer mine to absorb. A desperate, rambling message eventually came through a burner email from Clara. Not an apology, but a frantic demand for me to fix this. She still saw me as the competent fixer, not the injured sister. I didn't reply. Her crisis was not my responsibility, her freedom was. The old dynamic was dead. And I would not resurrect it. I had judged the golden child. The verdict was, forfeit the stolen life, and face your lack of self-reliance. The consequence for Clara was perhaps the most challenging, not prison, but existence without privilege. Did the collapse finally force her to grow, or did she completely break? What does true healing look like when the battle is over? The final piece of the story is the most important. It's been a year since the Wood Empire collapsed. The headlines faded, William faced his jail term, and I, Arabella, woke up every morning to a silence that was truly mine. This desk, bathed in sunlight, was my new throne. No more looking over my shoulder, no more performance. The air I breathed was clean, unpolluted by their judgment. Peace is the only prize worth winning. My practice now focuses almost entirely on ethical defense and helping those marginalized by corporate power. I mentor young lawyers from disadvantaged backgrounds. My own hardship became a source of strength, not a scar to hide. I was actively building the anti-Wood legacy, one ethical case at a time. My purpose was found in service, not in acquisition. I learned that authentic connection is quiet. There was a new group of friends, people who valued my mind, not my connections. People who knew my history but saw my future. When I smiled now, it was a genuine reflex, not a calculated diplomatic gesture. The years of isolation had been replaced by genuine, reciprocal kindness. I was seen, not simply utilized. The biggest lie the Wood family taught me was that I was responsible for their unhappiness. Therapy helped me unpack that burden. I was the victim, and the final stage of my revenge was to stop punishing myself for their crimes. It wasn't enough to destroy them, I had to rebuild me. The scars were a map of survival, not a mark of shame. William received his sentence, 5 years for fraud and tax evasion. It was just a number. I felt no celebration, no renewed anger. The man in the suit was irrelevant to me now. My focus remained on the future, not the debris of the past. His sentence was the closure of a chapter, not the content of my book. Vengeance is cold, but my life is warm. My mother was selling the mansion to pay legal debts. She moved into a small, functional condo. She was reportedly bitter, blaming everyone but herself. The facade was gone, and beneath it was a woman without substance. The greatest punishment for her was having to live an ordinary life without public admiration. She was denied the spotlight, the true measure of her loss. Her illusion was gone, her loneliness was permanent. At a recent legal event, I was honored for my pro bono work. I stood on stage, accepting applause for who I truly was. I realized the family's attempt to crush me ironically built my reputation. The scapegoat became the success story. I stood in the light they tried to extinguish. And it never felt better. I didn't need their permission to shine, I just needed distance. And Clara? The last I heard, she was working a low-paying job, struggling to adapt. She was forced to build a life from the ground up, just like I had done, but without my skills. I felt no satisfaction, only the knowledge that the world had finally applied fair rules to her. I did not break her, the truth of her own existence did. I gave her the consequence, the choice to grow was hers. People ask if I found forgiveness. The truth is, I never looked for it. Forgiveness implies their pain was a burden I had to carry. My goal was accountability and freedom. The only person I needed to forgive was the little girl who thought she deserved the abuse. I forgave Anna. Arabella needed nothing from them. My heart was healed by distance, not reconciliation. I closed the door to my new home, a small, honest space that was entirely my own. The chapter of the Wood family revenge was sealed. It wasn't about violence or drama, it was a surgical application of law and logic to correct a moral imbalance. The end of the trauma was the beginning of my true life. The debt was paid, and the ledger was balanced. What is the final lesson of the scapegoat's revenge? That your power doesn't come from fighting the people who hurt you, but from building a life they can no longer touch. I used my mind to dismantle their kingdom, but I used my heart to build my home. The story of revenge is over. But the story of my freedom is eternal. I won, not by destroying them, but by completely transcending them. The story of the Wood family is a warning. But what does it take for you to reclaim your own narrative? Life now flows like a quiet river, not a turbulent storm. The frantic energy of revenge has been replaced by the steady rhythm of self-cultivation. I tend to my small collection of indoor plants, symbolic of the growth I carefully nurtured within myself. This stillness is my greatest luxury, a peace money couldn't buy. I am finally living in the present, not reacting to the past. The legal name change to Arabella wasn't about running away, it was about defining my origin point. Every time I sign a document, I reaffirm that my identity is self-created, earned through struggle, not inherited through lineage. The Wood name now belongs to history, a cautionary tale. My name is my shield. My signature is my truth. I wear my chosen name with the pride of a survivor. I wrote a single line in my journal, revenge is the final act of letting go. It wasn't the goal, but the necessary process of separation. By seeking accountability, I forced the final break. Had I not acted, I would forever have been tied to their injustice. The punishment was for them, the freedom was for me. True closure is the realization that they can't hurt you anymore. I saw my mother once at a grocery store. She looked tired, ordinary, unrecognizable without her couture and staff. We made eye contact for a split second. There was no hatred, no recognition, just a blankness. I simply walked past. She was a stranger who once held power over my life. Now, she held none. The emotional cord was not cut, it had completely dissolved. William's appeal failed. The media barely covered it. He was now just another white-collar criminal serving time. The drama was over. The man who taught me that the law was a tool for the elite was now a captive of the very system he corrupted. His fate was the perfect, symmetrical conclusion to the moral theorem he laid out. The iron cage of accountability had finally locked. Clara is still struggling, but the latest rumor suggests she started night classes. She's finally using her mind for survival, not consumption. I won't intervene, but I harbor a quiet hope. Her real struggle begins when the pity ends. If she chooses resilience, her redemption will be entirely her own. The door to self-reliance is the hardest one to open. Family is no longer defined by blood or shared trauma. It's defined by presence and honesty. My small circle of friends, my colleagues, the people who have seen me at my worst and still cheer for my best, they are my family now. We choose each other every day. This chosen kinship is the foundation of my security. The broken past taught me how to value the present. I saw an old photo of myself as a little girl, eyes wide with naive hope. I realized I didn't inherit wealth or respect from the woods, I inherited their unresolved pain. The deepest closure came when I finally told that little girl, "You are safe now. You were enough, and you are free." The past is a memory, not a master. The end of the wood story was the beginning of Arabella's story. I'm starting a new legal fellowship, dedicated to systemic justice reform. It is an acknowledgement that my personal victory is small without broader change. My vengeance was personal, but my purpose is now universal. The goal is not just to survive, but to thrive and change the system. They called me a villain for my revenge. But the real villainy was the abuse that necessitated it. If you are a scapegoat, remember this: your worth is inherent, not granted by your abusers. Use your intellect, use the law, and above all, build a life so beautiful and so free that their downfall becomes a forgotten footnote. Your victory is your detachment, your freedom is your crown. The story ends here. It's not a story about bitterness, but about the profound, quiet strength required to rewrite your own destiny. The scars remain, but they no longer dictate the narrative. They are simply reminders that I survived. My revenge was complete because my self-love finally was. Thank you for bearing witness to my long walk to freedom. If you are ready to reclaim your own power, subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and the silent victory of the scapegoat. Your story is waiting to be written. The mansion was boarded up, awaiting auction. The imposing gates, once a symbol of prestige, were covered in rust. I came back not out of longing, but for a final ritual. I wanted to see the empty shell of the kingdom I helped dismantle. It was a mausoleum of their arrogance. The silence of the house spoke volumes about its moral emptiness. The stone walls held no power over me anymore. I walked to the old oak tree in the garden, the one place I was allowed to read as a child. Beneath the roots, I unearthed a small metal box I'd forgotten, a time capsule of the young Anna. Inside was a tarnished locket and a brittle drawing of my imaginary free life. A painful reminder of the desperation I had outgrown. The past was literally buried beneath my feet. I took the drawing and the locket, symbols of the desperate girl, and placed them in a small fireproof container. As the paper curled and the metal melted slightly, I felt the final heat of the old wound. It wasn't hatred burning, it was grief transforming into ashes. I was cremating the identity of the scapegoat. No remnants of their control could remain. I scattered the ashes into the air, letting the wind carry away the memory of fear and submission. This was my true moment of closure, far more meaningful than any legal filing. I was making space for the future. The air felt lighter, the burden lifted. I gave the past to the elements and reclaimed my spirit. I turned and walked away, never looking back. The true triumph of the scapegoat is not the revenge you inflict, but the healing you build. My story is over, but but yours may be just beginning. What is the one symbolic act you need to perform to truly set yourself free? The power to change your narrative is within you. My story, the saga of the scapegoat who fought back, is proof that your silence is not your fate. The path to freedom is messy, but it is real. If you are trapped in a narrative written by others, remember this: your intellect is your weapon, and accountability is your shield. Don't seek violence, seek justice. You have the power to dismantle their system. If this story resonated with your own silent battle, hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts below. What is the one truth you refuse to keep hidden? Let's build a community of survivors. Your journey starts now. If you take one thing from the Wood family saga, let it be these 5 immutable truths. They are the keys I used to unlock my cage. These aren't just survival tips, they are the foundation for a life lived free. Lesson 1: Documentation is destiny. Keep records of everything. Silence leaves no paper trail for justice. Your ability to prove your past secures your future. Lesson 2: You must outgrow the approval. The need for their love is the final chain. My revenge succeeded when I stopped needing them to admit their guilt. Lesson 3: Weaponize your intellect. Education and professional skill are the only assets your abuser cannot seize. Become competent. Be precise. The system works for those who understand its rules. Your brain is more powerful than their money. Lesson 4: Chosen family is paramount. Build a tribe based on honesty, not history. Lesson 5: Freedom is the ultimate revenge. Your life is the monument to your victory. Don't let their shadow define your light. Which of these lessons speaks loudest to you today? Tell me in the comments below.